Okay, 7.1. This is the last section till the final. And so this is evaluating expressions. Remember, expressions have no equal signs. So evaluation means you're probably going to substitute a number and get a value. So we're substituting a -3 into this expression. The -3 will be going in wherever there's an x, and make sure when you substitute that you put the substituted value in parentheses. So when we do that, the numerator becomes 2 times the -3, or -6, and another -1, make -7. The -3, if you put it in parentheses, will help you see that -3 times -3 is +9, plus the 1 will give you a final answer of -7/10. The second part, it says put x equals 0. So we put the 0 in for the x in each case. 2 times 0 is 0, and a -1 make -1 for the numerator. 0 squared is 0, plus 1 is +1. So -1 divided by 1 is just plain old -1. The next part, numbers that make a rational expression undefined. So what we don't want is the KO right here. We don't want a number in the numerator and 0 for the denominator. So what we do then is take our denominator and set that equal to 0 and solve it. So if x is 5 and we put it in here, we would have 5 minus 5, which should be 0, and we would have the KO. So when we solve that, when we put the denominator equal to 0 and solve it, we find out what value x cannot be, because if it was, it would make this whole expression undefined. Okay, continuing on with that, finding what would make this denominator 0. First, we have to factor this one. So it has a 1x out in front, so it doesn't have a number greater than 1, so we can go right to the factoring. So that would turn out to be x minus 3 and x plus 2. That would give us our negative x for our middle term, or -1x. So then we set each of these equal to 0 and solve it. And so we can see if 3 were in here, we'd end up with a 0 here times our parentheses, which would make the whole denominator 0, and that would be a KO. Likewise, if x was -2 when we put it in, this would make this 0, which would make everything 0. So that's our other KO. Remember, when you have a squared, you get 2 answers. I don't know if you'll see one like the next one, but if you do, I want to be ready for it. There is no variable down here. So it doesn't matter if the top is the numerator is a 0, we just can't have a number down here in the denominator. So x can be any answer, any number. So they're kind of easing you into the factoring here. They're going to start with simplifying expressions. So in this one, when it says simplify, you're basically going to reduce it into a simpler term. So always look at the numbers first if you have a number in the numerator and denominator. In this case, 7 is common to 21 and 14. So if we divide each of these by 7, we end up with 3 halves. Then we have like basis here. So we subtract the exponents. 3 minus the 2 is 1. So we get 3x divided by 2. The next part, again, you look to see if you can factor the numerator and or the denominator. We have 30 and 6 means both of those are divisible by 6. So we take the 6 out, and we divide 30t by 6. We're going to get 5t left over, and we divide negative 6 by 6, and we get negative 1. Can't do anything with the 36, so we bring that straight over, and then we see that 6 and 36 are multiples of each other. So this becomes 1. 6 will go into 6 once, into 36 6 times. So our answer then is 5t minus 1 over 6. So we're going to get a little more complicated here. We have 3x squared plus 13x plus 12. Now we don't have a number greater than 1 out here, so we can go right into factoring. So we got our x and our x. 2 factors of 12 that add up to 13 would have to be 12 and 1. So we factored the numerator. Now we factor the denominator. It doesn't have any constant term out here, but it does have a common variable. So we can always take out the lowest power of the variable, which would be x. And then we'd be left with x plus 12. Once we've factored all we can, then we look for similar terms, numerator and denominator. So these two would cancel. You can't cancel this x with that x because it has a positive 1 with it. It has another operation that's done. So we're left with the x plus 1 and the x. Do not cancel these two. Okay, next one is a bit more involved. Let me box this in, because we're going to do a lot with this one. 3x squared minus 8x minus 3. So now we have this number is bigger than 1, so we have to use the AC method. So our A times our C is our negative 9, and the B value is negative 8. So we have to have 2 factors. When multiplied, give us negative 9, and when added, give us negative 8. And they would have to be negative 9 and positive 1. So you can check yourself, multiply the two that you've chosen, and they got to be the AC. Combine them or add them, and they have to be the B. Okay, so one of these is going to go with the first term. One of these is going to go with the last term. So the 3 and the 9 we're going to put together because they're multiples of each other. So we're going to have 3x squared minus 9x plus the 1x minus 3. So now we have grouping. Look at the first two. We can take a 3 out for the number and an x out for the variable. We take a 3x out of the 3x squared, we get x. Take a 3x out of the negative 9, we get negative 3. Now remember here, you have to take something out of these two, even if it's a 1. So the lead term is positive 1, so we're going to take positive 1 out. In other words, we divide this by 1, we get x. Divide negative 3 by 1, we get negative 3. So these are our common factors. So they can come out, and what's left, the 3x and the positive 1, go in the next parentheses. So this, now we factor the numerator. This is our denominator down here. So We only have two terms here, so we look at what number can we take out of 2 and 18? It's 2. Then we can always take the lowest power of the common variables. So we take an x to the third out, and we're left with x squared minus 9 when we take the 2x to the third out of each. And remember, if there's a squared term, you can probably factor it further. Well, there's no middle term here. So this is the difference of squares. So it's 3 times 3, and 1 positive and 1 negative. So we don't end up with a middle term. So now we have factored this one. Now, anything, since they're all multiplied, they got to be all multiplied. You can't have a plus or minus sign between these. Anything like on the numerator and the denominator can be canceled. So we're left with 3x plus 1 on top, and 2x to the third times the quantity x plus 3 for our denominator. So some general rules then are factor the numerator and or the denominator and cancel the common terms. Okay, I'm going to end this now and pick up 7.2 on another video.